Hi, everybody, and welcome to this session of Erwin Insights 2020. Today, it's my great pleasure to introduce DI04 from Chaos to Control, which is actually my single favorite title of all of the titles from the session abstracts, Modern Data Governance in Action at Ultramobile. And I am really thrilled to introduce you to Mike Burks, who's the VP of Enterprise Information Management at Ultramobile, and he's going to take you through this really phenomenal case study. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, and welcome to today's discussion on how we manage data governance at Ultramobile. And you're going to hear me talk about Ultramobile and Mint Mobile. I'll go into a little bit to delineate between those two companies, but it really is all the same company, and it also adds to the chaos. I really was purposeful in titling this. I'm sure each of us have challenges in our business from day to day, either from the business rules or the business domains that we're trying to do, or the speed of business, or the technical complexities that we have to do. But life without data governance is chaotic, and I'm sure you've all lived through that. I'm sure hopefully you're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel as you go forward on your data governance journey. And really, data governance isn't something that you do and you put on the shelf. You have to continually work at it. So it really is data governance in action. It's not something that you can just deploy it and say, okay, let's check that square and go forward. It really is something that you have to work on. So in today's session, I'm going to give you some insight into how we manage it, how we set it up, how we built a business case to go forward and get funding for it, and how we use it to manage our change. And it's both the change that we anticipate and the change that pops up in the middle of the night. I'll look at the processes we designed to cover both the happy path, you know, when things are going exactly as you plan and you've meetings as teams and you're putting the governance out there, and how you can really use the strength of these tools to leverage that. But what happens when at the last hour some developer makes a change and that change breaks something in the environment, and suddenly you've got a web page that is showing the wrong information, or you've got something else that's causing an issue? How do we leverage these tools to go through and look at it? We'll dive into each of these tasks, and we'll kind of show the Erwin tools that help us do so. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to give you a little bit of history about myself. You know, the top button says, or the top bullet says that I left Oklahoma eons ago to see the world in the US Air Force. Kind of a funny backstory about that. My father was a rodeo rider that broke his back when he was about 19 years old. And because of that, he could not join his friends as they went to the Korean conflict. So as his firstborn son, from the moment I was born, I always knew that I was predestined to go into the services to kind of meet that commitment. So at the ripe old age of 17, after just graduating high school, I went out to the US Air Force, and I did get to pick which branch of the service, and I went out to the US Air Force, and oh my, what a exciting life that led to. I was chosen to go with automatic flight control technician. Interestingly enough, I was stationed right back in Oklahoma at Altus Air Force Base. Did that for several years, and was good enough at it that I was identified as someone that could potentially move out to work on the maintenance crew of Air Force One. I spent the next 6 years of my career supporting Air Force One and supporting the build out of the 747 that is now used. I was on the 707s, and it's interesting, I'm out in California now, and it's very fulfilling to go to the Reagan Library and seeing the plane that I've put many, many hours on. When the 747 came in, I changed career paths. I had gotten a degree in engineering, so I became the director of flight tests for a special project called Speckled Trout. And that was a plane that actually flew the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but also did flight tests. And that led to a follow-on at the very end of my career as a business intelligence lead to the Air Force Flight Test Center commander, as we were trying to move into total quality management. And I kind of go through that extensive background because it really made me who I am today, from the endpoint of seeing that data is just critical, and it's critical to get it right. Truly in the Air Force, it was a life and death matter. I was lucky enough after I retired from the Air Force to actually be contacted by the great folks at Toyota. And they saw that I had experience in a business intelligence tool that they really had invested in, and they were trying to grow their use of that tool. I started out as a consultant to them right before the Y2K experience. About 8 months into my gig there, I was hired as an associate and went on to lead the BI team, was moved over to lead on the infrastructure side, to lead all the database environments, the BI environments, and the storage environments. Then went back into data architecture, became the data architect for Toyota, led the data architecture group, and then finally ended up my career there as the national manager of their enterprise information management group, which basically was in charge of data governance, data stewardship, all the data warehouses, all the record of references, and all the BI stuff that we were doing. Really worked with some brilliant people there. I mean, the Toyota team is just amazing in what they grow and their ability to lead and their ability to go forward. And really my key takeaway from all that was you really have to be resilient and understand that the answer is out there. You have to really, know the right people, and part of doing our job well is understanding who can help you and who you can lean into, but just be resilient. So why did I leave Toyota? Well, about 4 years ago, Toyota decided to move their headquarters from California to Texas. And I put my family through so much moving and change in the Air Force that I just couldn't do that again. Went looking for a company and kind of landed on Ultramobile. I love the energy. I walked into the very first interview experience, and it was like nothing that I'd ever seen. The people were just excited, and there was just a buzz in the air that you didn't hear in Toyota. Just people really just going crazy and just having fun. I signed up, thought I was resilient to change, and didn't understand how fast change could happen. And really, my key takeaway in working with them over the last 3.5 years is you really can move the needle and have fun. You really can, make a difference and change things, and you got to be very open to change. So let's talk a little bit about Ultramobile and Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile is actually the more recognizable brand now because of our owner, but a lot of our chaos in our environment is driven by the fact that we have split personalities. We stood up Ultramobile several years ago. It very quickly, rapidly grew to one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. And what we had done is we had looked at a weakness in the current offerings at that time of people using phone cards. Those phone cards that had the 25 character codes that you had to type in before you could make a long distance overseas. Where our leadership was, looking at this voice over IP technology, and they said, hey, why don't we build a phone company that we can basically use to take all that calling card churn away from the customer and give very cheap and affordable long distance service to expatriates that live in the United States and call China, India, and Mexico at regular intervals. So that's what they did. They stood this up, and we really started taking the market share away from that. Well, guess what happened? A couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years after we started down that path, we started having applications that would do the same thing. So WeChat is a very huge application, obviously Facebook Messenger, but people started communicating in different manners, and we had to change and evolve. We had our base of Ultra customers that are there, but we wanted a new base, and so we launched Mint Mobile as a brand under Ultramobile. And it was really kind of avant-garde, out there in your face. Let's market on the internet, and it was funny. We had funny commercials, the carpet showers and the chunky milk commercial and the finger dipping commercial, if you've seen any of those in sports. But it really was driving, a change. So having an organization that's got, two hats, one that's kind of, out there and established in a stable group, and then Mint, which is all about doing it, as quickly as can and keep the customer at heart, was really something. If you look at our two brands, we really have very different business models between the brands. So in both of them sell a SIM card. I mean, that's basically what we do. We both of them partner to sell smartphones. We certainly don't manufacture smartphones, but we have different sales channels. So if you look at the Ultra brand especially, they have a huge dependency on indirect. And these are sold by mostly the mom and pop stores that you see on your street corners. They may be stores that do cell phone repairs. They may be stores that sell, 15 different brands. The customers are typically anonymous. The customers typically are, call internationally quite a bit. We're fighting for a very small piece of a very taxed dollar, if you will. There's not a lot of money in that segment, and there's a lot of competition. So there's a lot of other people in the same space fighting for those folks' service. So you have to figure out a way to differentiate yourself. If you go down to the direct channel, while Ultramobile which is shown by the purple on the bottom left. While Ultramobile does have an e-com presence that's growing, it's typically still partnered in that international group, and it's people that have learned about that they can go online and pay. A little bit less anonymous, but a little bit more ripe to fraud. So we see a lot of the folks try to come in and do some of the bad things in the industry try to attack those Ultramobile sites. Mint, on the other hand, is predominantly English-speaking American, very, very tech savvy, and actually a lot of them have quite a bit of money. So it's a very different brand of customers that you see, but we're both trying to come with a consistent goal of let's make sure we grow. Let's make sure that our customers remain satisfied. Let's become the employer of choice. Let's make sure it's that we retain and keep the best people, and let's disrupt the market. So let's change the way business is done. My last slide on chaos, and I know there's a lot that I spent setting it up, but I just want you to understand, how chaotic it can be. In the 3 years that I've been there, this is some of the things we've gone. So Ultramobile and Mint have split. Oh, by the way, Ryan Reynolds is now the majority owner in Mint Mobile, and it's quite interesting working for someone that has, his ability to send out a tweet and basically change the way our business works in a day. I'll never forget the CRM system refresh. This was actually the second week in October. I'd been there about 2 months, and I was in an executive meeting, and our customer care person came in and says, we've been on the CRM system since we started. It's just not big enough, and I decided I want to switch it out. And oh, by the way, we're not going to be renewing the contract in January, so we basically have 2 months to get it done. And I was sitting there with my Toyota hat on, thinking, well, in Toyota we'd be talking about it for a couple months before we did the project, and here we're going to execute. And they got it done. They also changed our ticketing system. They also changed our IVR system. They've also moved from a PHP SQL Server environment that was on-premise to a Node.js Lambda on DynamoDB and all the stuff that AWS has. Oh, by the way, changing our development streams from 2 to 9 so that we can rapidly deploy, and changing the middleware provider between us and our mobile network operators. So a lot of change could happen. And data governance is the only thing in all this change happening that's demitigating the risk that comes around it, because it helps us understand, here's where we are, here's where we've gone to, and here's how we got there. So when I was looking at the data governance problems to solve, and really, I came in and looked at this, and a very ready to move company that did a lot of great work, and they went as fast as they could. They were not in the shoot and then aim mindset. They did try to take focus and try to drive to it, but inevitably things would happen. So when I came through and created the business case to say, hey, we need to grow into a bigger and better company as far as how we manage data, I aligned with the fact that our company was all about growth. So in my business case, it went in and said, we can't possibly grow to where you want us to grow as a company if we don't do something about data governance. And the other thing that I used to do it was, our company was used to taking risks. So our company was used to saying, hey, let's deploy this, and if we have an issue, we'll fix it. Not that they would purposely deploy code with bad, but they would always want to get it out there in front of the customer at the expense of being 100% perfect, which was definitely different than what I had seen at Toyota and what I'd seen in the Air Force. But in being able to support that, I was saying, hey, I could de-risk some of those things, because what if I could tell you that changing the API was going to make a website break? What if I could tell you that? And oh, by the way, what if I could do all that discovery with a tool that would allow our engineers to come in and do their job and not have to focus on being SQL jockeys to go back and see what it was really going to take. So I did get the approval to move forward. This was one of the things that I had brought up, one of the slides that I brought up on my business case, where I said, we really have to have data catalogs that are integrated with the data logic and the structures. It'll help our collaboration between our teams, be it my team or be it our data developers, be it our engineering or our tech ops folks. Because right now it's really hard to find that documentation, and we're really dependent on tribal knowledge. I mean, we're still fortunate to have people that started with us when the company started almost 8 years ago, but that doesn't always happen. And, you know, having that dependency on them is really something that's tough. And we did not have a data modeling thing. I mean, at the very bottom, please, you know, let's just allow me to get a data modeler tool that I can come in and kind of put all these artifacts into one place. The second was really doing a data dictionary, you know, having something that could be searchable for folks to understand how the data was used and how it's stored. We knew at that time that there were going to be things coming up with GDPR, and certainly we didn't know the CCPA was there, but we anticipated the United States would be doing something around that. So, you know, the sooner that we could get ahead of that and the sooner that we could understand what we had, it would really help us. Again, we had done some good jobs. We put a lot of our data dictionaries in Confluence. I mean, we were a heavy user of Confluence, and you had, if you went into specific projects, you could find the information about that. But really what we were missing, that piece that tied it all together. And how can we understand, you know, once a project is launched, how has it evolved over time? I think a lot of organizations, the Air Force, Toyota, Ultra, weren't great about going back and updating the information once the project's launched and they're on now to the next thing. So how can we keep that going? And really the smart connectors and the mapping manager and the metadata manager that we got out of the erwin tools were what really was strong for us. And then finally, the business glossary. You know, how can we get the data folks or the business folks? How can we make them data folks? Very fortunate when I started. Tyler Leshny was our president at that time. Tyler was this data-driven organization. You got to be data-driven organization. He used data to drive his meetings. He expected his business team to understand where to find that data and where it and what it meant. And again, in Confluence, we could go in and define that. But I was, you know, really looking for something that we could pull it all together into a searchable catalog of data information you could go. So the business glossary manager and get the business involved in doing this. So it wasn't, you know, all on one team. Before I go forward, let me explain that my enterprise information management team is really on both sides. I have a foot in business, I have a foot in IT. The IT people won't claim me, the business won't really claim me, so I'm kind of an orphan out there. I actually report to the Chief Strategy Officer, who also, because we're a small company, is our Chief Financial Officer. So I have the pressure of, you know, let's control the cost, but let's create something that will create strategy for the company. So, you know, presented my business case, I got approval to move forward. We went through the source selection and looked at several tools and landed on Erwin. So this slide is important when you're looking at it. You know, really it's about how do you instrument your environment and how do you manage your environment. And I'm actually showing you kind of the high level process diagram on the right. On the left-hand side, somewhat obfuscated, is our data system, simplified, of course, but the yellow shows everywhere that we have Erwin now managing it. So if, you know, as I kind of hover over this, so the two operational systems, we still have some things that are doing with our international long-distance system that is a separate company that still ran in SQL. We have the Aurora stuff that goes through Lambda and lands into a Redshift environment. We use this Redshift environment as kind of a staging for our data lake, but also kind of a transactional feedback into some of our applications so that some of our applications that need some of the real-time data can pick it up. We use Talend and Scoop to move it over to our data warehouse. We have the data warehouse completely instrumented through Atlas and Atlas Apache. Our data warehouse is built on Hadoop, HDFS with Hive and Impala tables. We use Parquet tables as well. That data is surfaced through our BI tool through Denodo. And so Denodo is a data virtualization tool. When I came in, the Denodo didn't exist, and obviously Erwin didn't exist. The reason I put Denodo in there is because when I looked at the changes that were going to be happening from the standpoint of let's move from on-premise to the cloud, let's move you know, our systems, let's do a lot of changes, I had to do something that really helped me from our BI, or really extracted ourselves from our BI front-end tool, which we selected as Looker. So Looker sits on top of Denodo. It can also reach other systems. Denodo is primarily fed by the data warehouse, which is where all of our feeds from SQL Server and, from Salesforce and from our Google Analytics and middleware components, our call records from our customers come into. But we've got all of the system managed, and so we use that management when we go through our processes. So I'll step over to the right side of the diagram. The first is a BRD, a business requirements definition, basically. So when we start a project that we're going to do, and again, the top of this is managed change. So for managed change, we look at what we're trying to do. We define that in the case of a business, requirements documentation and definition. So we'll review that, and we'll look at our enterprise data model and say, hey, can we meet the requirements that we're seeing out of that BRD? Can we meet that? If we can, then we'll approve them and we'll move forward to a functional requirements definition, and it's great. We'll go and do our development. If we can't, then we'll start meeting with our DSR, which is our data services team, who owns kind of the DevOps engineers, the data DevOps engineers. We'll start meeting with them and we'll say, hey, let's look at the changes that we want to propose. And so we'll go through that together. We'll review those changes. They'll get approved, and the approval again now is between the tech ops folks that have to do them, myself as kind of representing the business and that will meet the business requirements, and then our engineering team is somebody that says, yes, we can use that. And so we'll approve it. If it's something that we can't do because we can't make the change at that time because maybe it's going to have a functional impact somewhere else, I mean, we'll simply descope it from that part of the phase. Again, we were wanting to move very, very fast, but one of the things that people were most worried about when I implemented this is that I'm going to implement some kind of bureaucracy. I'm going to come in as the guy that's being used to working, at the Air Force, where everything is, very, very regimented, or working at Toyota, where everything's very conservative, and all of a sudden I'm going to put a lot of overhead on this very fast and nimble company. And that wasn't what I had to promise that I wouldn't do that. But we had to come up with a way to say, hey, if something's going to happen, if you're really trying to make this change happen, and it's going to impact something else that we just can't approve at this point. But what would happen in the past is if somebody had not seen that, interface, and had not understood that that was going to happen, then they would have launched the project and something would have broke. And it could be, something that had nothing to do with anything that we had done. Let's look at our unmanaged change to understand how we really leverage this. So using the data intelligence suite, we're able to go back and kind of take before and after snapshots of our environments. And we do this on a regular basis, and we compare those before and after snapshots looking for something that's changed. And if we see, for example, maybe Salesforce table has been, a couple of columns have been added. And it's funny, if you add columns at the end of an ETL track, usually nothing will break. But what if you add a column somewhere in the middle? You can really mess it up. So we'll use a DI suite and kind of look at the metadata manager and kind of understand if things have changed. And if they have changed, then we'll write a ticket, and we'll actually automatically write a ticket. So we've integrated the DI suite in with our Jira ticketing system, so that the ticket will be generated, and it'll be something that then we sit down with the engineering team to review. If there's changes needed, then we go through the approval process. If there's no changes needed, but it's just something we have to account for, then we'll manage the changes and communicate to the business and go on to business as usual. So I think really important is that you create a process around what you're trying to do, and then you just fill in the gaps with the tools. You just fill in the process components. So let's start diving into the managed change a little bit. When we're looking at table design, you're really looking at the data alignment, how you create tables, how you validate your designs, and how you publish your designs. So I put the products used in this, and I put the mapping manager and the Confluence, data modeler, of course, it serves a lot of these functions. And then I've given you a little description of what it does. What has been really useful for us is to kind of go forward and basically go into our BRDs and leverage, the ability for the tool to create kind of these lineages, and then we place these back into our BRDs so that we can see at the time that it happened that this is what we were thinking on, and it's kind of captured with the Confluence sheet, so it almost kind of turns into a technical support document that folks can leverage. Certainly we create the ERDs and the data modelers, and then we go through and we look at the data models, and we can have the different teams come in and look at them and improve the designs. And once we've approved it, then we can publish it. When we're looking at our table validation, we're basically looking for the business and us to work together to go in and look at the business glossary and add the business rules and definitions and policies. When we're pushing it to production, this is where we're really looking at the metadata manager that kind of shows us the forward lineage of that data model and automates the processes into the data warehouse. So I'm going to go through a couple of screenshots that I've taken. I'm always leery about doing something in real time because I always am afraid I'm going to show something that I shouldn't, but I'm going to go through some of the screenshots to show how these tools work. So I think most anyone that's familiar with Erwin really understands the data modeler and its usefulness. I have been associated with the Erwin data modeler for probably the last 28 years, and that's verification by my puppy that she agrees. But I've been associated with for a very long time, and it gives us the ability to kind of go in and model what we're trying to do. So we can go in and create those models and publish them or share them out so people can see it. We can come in and look at the kind of the relationship view so that we can easily communicate to our business leaders. We can, or to our IT friends, we can easily communicate to it the relationships that we have. We can drill down into all of the entities and relationships and define them so that the projects team, we can all be on the same page. And then, once we have all agreed that it's something that we can do, that we can use, we'll go back and we'll ask for approval and we can add comments. So if there are things that we may want to implement now and things that we want to push off to later, we can implement that in the comments and just kind of show that lineage or that history of how it came to be that this change was requested. So once we've defined it, we can go into the DI suite, and I apologize, I probably should have put a slide in here that basically showed the navigation, but in the DI suite, you basically click on the 9-square block here and you come into these different things. So you're either looking at the data catalog, or in this case, the data literacy, where we're going through and looking at the business glossary manager. And this business glossary manager helps us define rules and definitions and policies that we want to add to the system. So we can go in and edit it. As in this example, I'm doing something pretty, straightforward. I'm saying that, hey, a distributor is a relationship between a master agent and a retailer. So, this is what it is. I've come in, I can have folks that go out and basically own that and look at it and make sure they manage it and make sure they agree with it. I can show the relationship to the system. This is in the dealer portal. This is a distributor in the dealer portal. In case you may have, different names that mean different things in different systems, you can tie them, that association to the system with which you're looking at. And then I can, view all the associations. So this mind map tool is really something that's been very, very helpful for us, because once I come in and define this and I click on the mind map tool, then I'm basically tying that association to all the other associations in there. So imagine how powerful this is as a tool for someone that's coming in to saying, hey, what if I change something in this area? This is a really great point to show where it's being impacted. So it really helps us understand all of the different areas, the technical areas of our business that are impacted by changes that we may make into all this. And certainly you can go through and you can expand them and collapse them, export them, do different tools. I'm not really trying to show you how it's used. I'm just showing you that we do use it for this. Another thing that is so important is being able to understand the lineage. So being able to go in and say, let's really look at a system and see what we're impacting from a down the line place. So that's just super important. I'm going to talk a little bit more about forward lineage when we get into the unmanaged change. So let's talk about that unmanaged change, because I showed you how to use the tools to go in and say, let's create a model. Let's make sure we have a lot of reviewers and approvers of that model. Let's take those reviewers and approvers and let's look at all the system components. Let's look and see from a macro view or drill down to a micro view of where it's important. Let's do everything we can to make sure we're doing this right. Let's publish it. But what happens when things go bump in the night? And they do go bump in the night. I think the best example I really ever saw of something happening wasn't with Ultra, but it was actually with Toyota, and we had gosh, it probably predated when I joined there in 2000, but there was a SQL server setting on one of the mini super servers that we had. I think we were at one point running over 1,000 SQL server databases. but there was a table in one of the SQL servers sitting in a little remote corner of that database schema, and no one realized that that had a pretty important function until one Friday morning we all walked in and there was kind of an uproar going through because the lights in our Portland port facility wouldn't turn on. So they'd gone through the whole night with it being dark. Thankfully, there was no planned shift that evening, but from a security measure, they were all kind of what went on. And we rolled it back to kind of find out finally that there was that one little SQL table that kind of controlled the schedule of those lights. And we had overlooked it when we did a migration of that SQL database to something else. So it's just, a great example of unmanaged change can happen, and it is going to happen. So if you have a tool in place that will help you understand those changes, you can get to the, you can get to the root cause. I mean, obviously we have between when we came in at 7 in the morning until that night when it got dark to get it fixed, and we did get it fixed, but it was really kind of lucky, and we just went through and said, hey, what did we do yesterday? I think all IT problems start that way. What did we do yesterday? And we saw that we had turned that off, and then we started digging into it. We found that very undocumented case, that probably happened 20 years ago, and it just was outside the tribal knowledge. But by using the products for unmanaged change, we can come in and we can really capture those structural data changes that come in. We can leverage those changes to automate the creation of tickets, and then we can do comparison reports and put it in the ticket and put it right in the folks' face and saying, hey, here's what happened. Let's kind of talk through it. So, when you're looking at scanning for changes, this is just an example of a metadata manager. You're going through and you're looking at a table. And these can be pretty large. I mean, certainly something that you would never be able to go through and do by yourself every day. But you're going through and you're looking at those, and when you look, you can see if there's a new version of the metadata which would indicate that there's a new change. And this is kind of showing a manual representation of what we've actually been able to work with Erwin to automate this. So we can go through and we can see we've got changes. We can kind of run the templates against the existing systems, and we can finally come up and say, hey, we've got a change in the system from what we saw. We can actually then use our Jira Smart Connector to show those changes, and then we can export those changes out so that folks can then be ticketed and looked at. So this is just kind of showing the configuration, how this would come out and look as far as configuring the ticket. And as I said, we've been able to go through kind of a step further and automate all of this, so it works very well, and we get the tickets to come up and see. And here's just kind of an example of what we see in the alerts. We see an issue that comes out. We found that we had a mapping version level that was off. We've assigned it to our lead that manages all this. Fiona does a great job managing our tools, but we've assigned it to her to work, and we now have a comparison of the mapping changes to show what happened with it. So very, very powerful in going and identifying those tools and identifying what's happened. I'm going to kind of move from the managed and unmanaged change part of it, because obviously that is the bread and butter or the guts of what we do with it. But let me talk about some of the reference features that you find that really do help that kind of speed to market that we talk about. So data lookups through the data intelligence suite, how many times does it come up and you're trying to find a certain attribute, and it really helps you to go in just a searchable kind of context of where that exists in the environment, so you can go through and look at that. Impact analysis, really, giving you that statistical and visualized form of how a table has been impacted and how it's going to impact other tables. The resource manager, just making sure that we have the right people seeing what we can see and what they should see. Certainly a business user portal that looks modern is a way that the data stewards and engineers and the business folks can go in and kind of understand the data, but interact with it in a way that's not quite as formal as a model, but just a way that we can go in and see it. And then, case-wise suite, we honestly haven't done a lot with the business process diagram creation and case-wise, but it's certainly there, and it's certainly something we can leverage. And then the Evolve tool as well. So when you look at data searches, the ability to come in and search a table or column across all of your entities, and looking at this, and this was actually a presentation that when I was kind of going back and giving some of the feedback. I mean, we're much, much larger than this, but 22,607 columns that we're looking at and 1,198 tables. We're a small company. Your table set might be much, much larger than this. Ours is much, much larger than this now. But the ability to go in and just type, kind of an empty name and go out and find it is just phenomenal, because quickly you can see everywhere that naming convention is used, and you can actually use some of its AI matching logic to go out and find tables that are similarly named. The impact analysis, I absolutely love this. So, the ability to go in and see if anything you're going to do is going to impact the flow of information. And I like to say, as I explain kind of our role in our business, and I'm sure you've heard this analogy before, but if you think of, the flow of information from the data creation to the consumer, there's kind of different components of it, right? So there's definitely the component that's the physical pipe, right? It's the things that, your IT departments work so hard to make sure that the pumps pushing the water, are working right, that the water has got enough, or that the pipes have enough bandwidth to push the amount of water through that you need it. But the quality of the water, that lands on us, that lands on data governance. The ability to go in and understand when we change something, what we're going to impact, and what we're going to do to affect the flow of that information is so critically important. So really, helping us understand that and looking at things through impact analysis, the ability to understand if we're impacting it as a source or a target, the ability to look at forward lineage, so we can actually go through and look at the APIs that are, calling, what's happening with that data, and calling and saying, hey, if we change this API, we're going to impact these. So just the ability to go through and see all this data and see it all, in such a nice package and in one place is just a phenomenal tool. It really is great for us. You can go back and look backwards, right? So you can say, hey, what upstream of this data point, I want to come in, I want to act on something here, but what in the backstream is changed, or how am I going to be impacted? And obviously these things can be drilled down. I'm trying to show you at a level to show you that they exist, but not show you at a level where you're seeing business definitions and rules that I probably shouldn't share. And this is actually looking at the Nodo connection again, which is the data virtualization going backwards. The business user portal, so what our folks can see, what our business folks can see, basically, comes up with the dashboard just to show, what we're doing. The sensitive data, again, this was when we came in before we started doing our GDPR and our CCPA. So we actually used, our tools to kind of go in and say, hey, here are sensitive columns, or here's one of the big things in telecom is CP&I data. And so here's the CP&I data that we have, so we can kind of understand where those are. We can show you the subject areas and the maps. It's just really a great way for the business to kind of look at the data ecosystem and, helps us kind of track the changes that are going on. The resource manager, this is, just looking at Fiona's, but, it kind of helps us understand how she's doing. And again, this was last activity on July 8, 2020, so you can kind of see that this is a couple months ago, but just understanding, what she's touched and what she's gone in and looking at it to see and looking at her changes. I mean, this is pretty important to be able to go in and look in one place and kind of see the changes that person has implemented and how they've done this. And, then I can go back and start looking at managed and unmanaged change and make sure people are following the processes the way they should. So it's just really, really neat. Erwin Evolve, like I said, we haven't done a lot with, but it certainly is something that we played around. You can see that we were trying to go through it for a business commissioning project that we were trying to do. So it's something that we plan to use. We actually had stood up Erwin on premise as part of our initial rollout, and then about a month ago we moved everything to the cloud. So we moved the very last of our environments to the cloud, and so in doing that we moved Erwin to the cloud. So we've taken a little bit of a technical departure from what we've been trying to align and do with the tools as we kind of beefed up the infrastructure and got us in a good place with that. So Erwin Evolved, and then kind of in summary, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, but in summary, it really has to be about something that blends all the different technologies and the process to provide value to all stakeholders. I mean, if you're like me, you're a data geek and you get excited about this stuff, you get excited about seeing a lineage on paper. But if you're really not providing value to that business user that's just really looking for, what's happening down the line, or how is this change going to impact, or how, it's hard sometimes to say, why is this going to take 3 or 4 weeks to deploy? It's really, valuable to have these tools that can help you kind of understand where you are in this. And really, I stress again, when you're creating those business cases, you've got to go out and talk to your stakeholders and understand their pain points and say, well, I think I can help you here. Engineering team, I think I can help you get things out the door. Business, I think I can help you, protect our customers and maybe not have, changes that will go out and impact them bad. And then certainly for data management, it just makes it a lot easier. Really successful integration across all the touch points is critical because, transparency breeds trust. If, people are working in silos, and especially as we move to microservices architecture, we're going to have a lot of hands. Remember, we now have 12 different hands and 12 different work streams touching our systems. And the ability of all 12 of those people to come together and understand what each other's doing and understand, we can enforce rules, we can enforce conventions, and really have them all see that, but making sure that we roll it up. I mean, I don't have a staff of tens of folks like I did at Toyota. I have a staff that's very, very lean, but we are able to use these tools to really go through and manage all those touch points. You got to be able to measure things in the context of the business. So again, this kind of speaks to, you got to be able to get things out the door quickly. You've got to be able to show that you're going to improve the environment because, you're spending a lot of the business money. It's funny, we used to measure business value at Toyota by, the profit we sold on the car and how many Camrys do you have to sell before, you paid for that. Imagine the same thing applied to a SIM card that is much, much less than a car. So how many customers do you have to bring in to kind of impact and make that happen? So, really kind of put it in terms of the business. And we've been able to show our business now that by leveraging these tools, the collaboration is much, much better. It's great. I mean, just the underlying collaboration that I see between engineering and data and tech ops, where we all come together and we're discussing this on a centralized framework, that's probably been the biggest joy to me, in just seeing how it's brought all of these different teams together. So really, really have appreciated that. Easy navigation is a key, because you can do a great job. I mean, there's data lineage tools. I mean, you can always look at something. Do I do a full stack? Do I do a best of breed? And, I've lived in both environments. Certainly we chose to go the full stack route with Erwin, but you can kludge together best of breed things and have the best at every different piece. But if you use disparate technologies, you can't discount the amount of money it's going to take you to put those together, and the amount of effort that's going to take. And what does money and effort mean? Well, it means you got to redouble the value that you get, but also is going to delay getting that out to the other group. So really, I can't speak highly enough of being able to have the data intelligence suite, where it's kind of a one-stop shop for us to go in and see all the different components of that. It's easier to manage from a deployment perspective because, you've got everything done. It's easier to monitor. You've got everything that ties together very seamlessly. And then the connectors, which are really the glue to making this work. The integration partnership is key. I will honestly say, and at Toyota, I was considered to be part of IT. I actually reported to the CTO at Toyota, but, being an IT person, I understand what it takes to make this work. And I've got to say that, in all the years at Toyota, and certainly in this, I've not seen an integration partner that I've enjoyed as much as Erwin. Their ability to kind of roll up their sleeves, understand our business, understand our connectors, understand kind of the nuances of how we are, to come in management. I mean, everything, the success of Erwin is largely based in their ability to create these connectors that just do a phenomenal job. And they are custom. I mean, they are custom when they look at it, but they do work from period to period. And, they kind of stand by with that support as you change things. We've actually, like I said, gone from on-prem to AWS for our Denodo instance. So we've changed versions on Denodo, and we've started out with integrations with Kinesis for our changes that were happening, in our API management. And we've now gone from that to Elasticsearch, and being able to have a partner that you can go out and sit down and just phenomenal from the standpoint of being able to sit down with them and go through as we develop was great. Integration partnership, like I said, is the key, and it really helps us function as a team. So with that, I'm going to open it up for some question and answers.
So I just want to say, you guys have accomplished so much in a really short period of time. I mean, we've seen projects span, 18 months. We've seen projects span 6 months. It just seems to me like you really have been so focused on delivering against, very specific milestones. So let me ask you just a couple of quick follow-ups. I'm assuming that your business orientation, which seems very strong, right? The way you tell the story, you're talking at it from the business needs first and then how the technology brings it to life. So what was one of the biggest challenges that you experienced with getting the business on board with the governance project, with the needs and the requirements when you were building your use case?
Well, I think it's different in every environment, but I will tell you for me, and as I said, my boss is, the chief strategy officer and CFO, also was a co-founder of the company, and was probably also the person that first introduced all the technologies and the systems that, we were slowly moving against. So basically, I was kind of coming in and saying, hey, there's a lot of stuff in your baby that you created that, I need to make sure I monitor, because it's pretty ripe for people to go in and change. It's pretty, easy for people to kind of abstract something and do something that, causes some issues. So for mine, I was kind of that political tightrope of going in and saying, hey, I really need to monitor all these endpoints, and it's become something that we just can't do anymore, because you want to scale us to, be 8 times the size that we are, and you want us to be able to stand up multiple engineering lanes. I mean, we were restricted to 2 engineering lanes because you couldn't have 2 people on the code at the same time. I mean, it was really a spider web, and if you had too many people in there, it was going to break. And so using it as an enabling function to basically allow us to go faster and go further. And it's hard when you're selling an idea, right? It's hard to put data governance in process, and it's hard to stand up and say, you know what, if you'll sign on this bottom line, I will get the projects out a week sooner, than we are now, or 2 weeks sooner. And our projects move at light speed, as you say. But I could go in and say, you know what, I guarantee we're going to be cleaner. I guarantee we're going to have errors. And I actually went in with some of the errors that we had caused. And, it's little bitty things. It's like you change the name of a plan, and you don't realize that maybe some marketing app is using that plan name. And so if you make it a little bit technical to help something that you're doing, it suddenly breaks a customer-facing website. So, that kind of things we've been really able to go in and show, and I think our deployments have done so much better and so much, saved in the time of rework on the little things that we didn't see. So, but I think
That's
just getting
great.
that buy-in, getting that buy-in when it's really something you're trying to sell, that you can't just show them. I mean, you can show them all the pretty screenshots, but you're really being able to communicate, this is what it's going to do for you.
Well, the other thing that I thought was really interesting too was when you talked about the building of the business case, you framed it around growth, right? And so much of what we see is more risk avoidance than it is sort of getting your arms around how to grow, and data intelligence is going to help you grow. So to me, that was really sort of a magical thing to hear you say. All right, one final question. If you had to share one piece of advice, just one, with somebody who's just beginning this journey today, what would it be?
Well, I think, obviously it helps to come in and kind of have an understanding and have the experience, or at least get somebody on your team that's had the experience. So, if you have to hire a consultant to help you understand this, because it's a really hard thing to get your hand around. But I think having somebody that's experienced, will help you, because there are times when things are going, you just can't see it all put together, right? You're working on components of it, and you're getting a component to work, but you don't have the upstream components that make it really, really sexy, if you will. So I think just having somebody that can go through and say, yeah, let's go through this journey, let's plot it out, let's work with it. And I got to say that working with the erwin deployment managers, and just really, really special people. I've been to thousands of project management meetings in my career, and every week to sit down and just boom, 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 boom. This is where we are, and this is how we're doing. It gave me so much confidence to step back. And it was funny, at the time I was actually running our revenue assurance. I was actually running our fraud management. I had a little stint running our PMO, all the same time running the EIM group as we were trying to gen up and and grow. So it just really, we deployed all of this, without me having to be in there hands-on, and not that I would make a difference, but probably staying out of it probably made the difference. But I just had the confidence because I could look at the team and say, this team gets it, and they're working together well with us. And I just, just a phenomenal outcome, I think.
That's really great to hear. So very validating on my side to be an executive working for an organization that hears that kind of thing from a valued customer like you guys. Really means a lot. Well, I just want to thank you so much for such a great job, such a great story, all your dedication. If you would kindly move to the last slide for me, I'm just going to tell folks what's coming next. Because we're still early in the game. So at 11 a.m. today Eastern time is a session you won't want to miss on powering your data lake initiatives, followed by the data forensic files at noon today. And don't forget, in downtime, you can head over to the Solutions Lounge and the networking lounge and meet other really great customers like Mike. There's a lot of people that are looking to network, to shortcut some of the answers that you've already got. And we will have some of our experts from data modeling, data intelligence, Evolve, and our services team manning the solution booth throughout the entirety of the event. So make sure that you drop by, and also visit IT Central Station, where they'll be setting up some live meetings to take customer reviews. So that's really exciting. Thanks again, Mike, for your time. What a great session. We really appreciate it. And thanks
Thank you, Marianne,
for being part of Erwin Insights.
Thank you.